Okay, here we go. We are all ready to talk about the radios. And my little thumbnail in the front, I was just like, hey, I got to do one fast. Okay, good enough. I don't know. We're talking about radios. Welcome to the superpilotish channel, talking about radios in my basement. My name's Graham Wilson, too, just in case you were wondering. Okay, so today, as a special request from one of my faithful viewers, Shecky Pavel was saying, hey, do something about radios, radio frequencies, and stuff like that. So, and here's Shecky in the chat. Good morning. Yeah, so, you could get as deep into radio waves and propagation and blah, 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 blah as much as you want. But I'm going to kind of tell you where the radio stuff fits in to the world of aviation and a little bit outside of the world of aviation too, just to keep it kind of, I don't know, viewer friendly, or just so anyone can just know a little bit more about radios. So just briefly, I did a little bit of research on this. Like, I don't do massive in-depth research for this show because I don't get paid. So but yeah, so the history of people using radios in airplanes. Way back in the early days, they used what they called low frequency radios. And then they found out later that, we'll move to the medium frequency, which is like a little bit higher than the low frequency ones. And and this was used partially for communication, partially for navigation. So we're going to do a little radio primer here. And okay, so the way I'm gonna show this is I was kind of thinking, how can I show this? And so it's gonna be kind of like as if it's on a radio, and you turn in your radio dial, and then the little pointer goes back and forth. So I'm gonna kind of sort of treat it like that. So we're gonna talk first about, we're going from low frequency radios up to high frequency radios, and I'll tell you a few little stories along the way. Okay, so we're talking about AM radio. Okay, now this is in kilohertz, which, look at this, kilohertz. I think that's the way to do it. And you don't really, if you are going to be doing a written test for Transport Canada or the FAA, it's good to get those little kilohertz and megahertz and get those things kind of straight in your head, because they like to kind of trick you on that, especially when you get to if you're writing your airline transport tests. Then that's when you really have to know that, okay, oh, I just tuned in on 126.7. Is that megahertz or kilohertz? It's megahertz. But yeah, so in your radio, you're always turning in just some number. Like if you're tuning in your favorite rock station, 101.1 WRIF over here in Detroit, 101.1, is that kilohertz or megahertz? It's actually megahertz. But so you don't need to know it. You just put in 101.1. So and breaker Dan. Hi. Okay, so we're going to talk about kilohertz, and this is for airplanes. There's a thing called, I got to use my fancy eraser here already. So there's this thing called a non-directional beacon, and that's what it was originally used for navigation. And there's all these acronyms in aviation. So the non-directional beacon is an NDB. And so that's basically all it was a little AM radio station. And then there's an instrument in the airplane that would just basically have an arrow, and it would point, okay, if it's pointing over here, okay, I better turn my airplane there until it's pointing straight up. Now I'm going directly to that AM radio station. And it would also transmit out a little Morse code, and then you would tune into it and you'd hear your dots and dits and everything like that, and then you would know, okay, that's the identifier of that. I have the right navigational beacon. I just go towards that and find my airport. So, and that was a range of 190 to 535. All right, here we go. 190 to 535. And okay, cool. So you dial in. Maybe it's you look on your map. It says okay, 220. You tune it in. Beep 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 beep. Okay, that's the right one. Find your airport now. But what they did was the thing that would show you where that airport is was called an ADF, automatic direction finder. So it would just point to the AM radio station. But they made the radios. They made the ADF so that it can go all the way up to, okay, you could go from 190 kilohertz all the way up to 1750 kilohertz. So the fun thing to do in your airplane is, if you wanted to listen to your AM radio stations, okay, and then here in Windsor we got the Big 8 CKWW, the ultimate rock station back in the day. Used to be able to go really far, but they chopped the antenna down in half, so it doesn't transmit as far as it used to in the 60s. But yeah, people in like New York could hear AM 580. And I remember I was camping one night up north of Elliott Lake. So that would be how many miles north? 300, maybe about 350, 400 miles north. I'll take a guess. Yeah, probably about 400 miles directly north of here. And we were in the campground, and I'm listening in, and I'm like, oh, I can hear AM 580 from Windsor, 400 miles away. So that's because the advantage of this of your AM radio is that it's good at low altitudes. And I'll draw another little thing here because it kind of skips across. All right, here we go. There's the Earth. And then so around the Earth, they got what they call is the ionosphere. Yeah. So it's kind of a layer of the atmosphere where there's a bunch of stuff going on apparently. And if you got your little AM your AM radio station here in Windsor, it bounces at night. It'll bounce off this thing like that. And then so here I am camping in my tent up in Elliott Lake. So I mean that worked great for airplanes. And as this distance here is always going to be the same of the wave. But if your little donut gets thinner here, then it can go all the way. It can go a little further. So at nighttime, ionosphere comes down, and then so your AM signal goes further at low altitudes. So I mean that worked out great for airplanes when they're navigating at first, because they didn't really go up that high, and so that worked out okay. But oh yeah, here's another thing too. So the AM radio that goes from a range of 540 to 1700. So if you look on your radio, just your regular dial on your radio, AM radio is going to go from 540 to 1700. So AM 580 here in Windsor, that's what you could, and you can see that the radio in the airplane to listen to your non-directional beacon is between 190 and 750. So what you could always do if you're flying around and you're kind of bored, you could tune in on your navigational radio and you could listen to AM 580 over here or whatever station you wanted. And then the little the little pointer would point to where the music's being transmitted from. Now there's a French radio station. It has its transmitter. It's AM 1550, and it's like just south of the Windsor Airport. So if you find that and you head north, it'll line you right up with runway 30. So so that's what there was an old guy used to fly around doing charter stuff, and every time you get in the airplane, he'd always tune in the French radio station, and you can listen to it, but if you want to hear the French news and stuff. And they had some pretty good music sometimes. And so he would do that just as an extreme backup navigation aid. Just find that, head north, and they'll find the airport. So not the most reliable, but in a pinch, it's a little thing that you can keep in your back pocket if you're lost somewhere and You lose your map, get sucked out the window. That can happen. I know so. I know that happened to someone before. Actually, did they get their map sucked out? No, actually, it was a flight test. There was a flight test examiner. Buddy of mine, he was doing his flight test. So he's sitting in the pilot seat, the examiner's sitting in the co-pilot seat or whatever. And there's a little vent window there, and he had a marking sheet to mark off all the exercises you're supposed to do. And so he was just kind of writing next to the vent window, and the paper went right out the window. So he was looking around. He had to mark the flight test, and he asked my buddy, "Do you got a spare piece of paper?" And he just remembered all the exercises you're supposed to do. But yeah, you can lose maps that way out the window. A lot of people do that on if you have I've seen that with a D. Well, I'm flying around. Some people they think it's cool. They put the map out the window of a little vent window to get more air coming in, but then the map can get sucked out. I've seen that happen only on the ground here in Windsor. At someone had it's a DA-20 Diamond Katana. It's a little training airplane. You have to taxi with the canopy fastened. You can't. So you got these little tiny windows there, and usually people they put their hands out there. Some people put their map out, and it gets sucked up. And yes, Mona Moore, I did lose a jacket like that. I lost a jacket out of an airplane before, but I don't know if I think I told that here before. Okay, we're gonna because my audience is telling me asking about losing my jacket, and I did. So what I was doing was I was showing a student, okay, what happens if you have a door open in flight on a Cessna 172? So okay, this is getting away from radios, but who cares? I have a request. So yeah, so I had my jacket in the back seat, and the guy was yeah. So I was going to show him exactly. Okay, here we noticed that our door is open in flight, and I wanted to show him that like there's nothing to worry about if you have a Cessna 172. It's got like car doors on it. You know, they open up like car doors. So I actually opened up the door in flight because and I you're going through the air at like okay, it'd be maybe about 100 knots, which is 115 miles per hour. So you try to open your car door at 115 miles per hour, that air is just keeping it shut. So I said, look, you can't even open it if you want. You'd only be able to open it maybe about that much. And the air resistance is way too much to do that. So the way you do that in any airplane is you close your air vents, open the window, and then close the door, latch it, then you can close your window or whatever. And so I said, look, you can't. And I'm flying the, actually, he was flying the plane, and it was right next to me in the instructor seat. So I'm like trying to open the door. Like, look, man, I can't even fall out if I want to. Don't even worry about it. Because some people do panic if there's if the door opens in flight. It's really not that big of a deal for most airplanes. So I'm like, look, I can't even jump if I want, you know. But as I was doing that, the wind was sucking my jacket out of the back seat and out the door. So, anyways, we landed, and it was a little chilly. So it's like I better put on my jacket. And I'm like, I look in the back seat of the plane. Where's my jacket? So it's like, oh no, it got sucked out the door. So I had my keys in there for my car and everything. So I had to get one of the guys to drive me back home to get my keys for my car, the spare keys, and go back there. Anyways, so don't have loose objects in your airplane, and yeah, you can lose stuff out of the back seat. So I don't know. Some farmer must have got he must have got a good. I usually keep like a beer opener on my keychain just in case, bottle opener. So I think some farmer plowed his field and got a jacket and a free bottle opener. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about FM radio. FM radio, that is in that's in megahertz. So let's do that. Megahertz. And okay, so your regular FM radio that you're used to listening to your awesome rock station. Oh, spelling mistakes here again. Hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. FM radio. Okay, so when your regular Joe Blow radio it goes from 88 on your FM dial to 108. I don't know if you can see that. Yep. So your FM radio, you can tune it in from 88 to 108. Very cool. And then so there's enough now. So what happened next? After they were fooling around with all the AM radios and technology evolved, that they got rid of. Okay, this worked great at low atmosphere for our AM radio, but the FM radio doesn't bounce off of the ionosphere like that. So let's draw the world again. We are the world. Here we go, and you're going to be okay. This is definitely not to scale. This is our donut world. I'm a donut girl in a donut world. Okay, so we're flying our airplane. Here's our little navigation thing. If we were up high enough and far enough away with our airplane, say we're flying around here, totally not to scale. So there's our airplane. If we had the old school, it would be kind of bouncing off of the ionosphere, and you wouldn't even pick it up in the airplane because it would be over the ionosphere at night. But because we have the FM radio, it transmits in a line of sight, so it would transmit directly to the airplane, and he could pick it up and then just fly along. So yeah, so that's it can go. That has its advantages. It has a little bit of a disadvantage, I guess, if you're in a valley or something like that, and your emergency locating transmitter also goes in the FM range. So if you crash your plane in a valley and your transmitter is transmitting, "Hey, we had a crash. Search and rescue, come and take a look at us." It would be here we are. There's our mountains, and we crashed our plane in here. I never drew a crashed airplane before. How do we do that? We here's a wing. It's not looking too good. And it's kind of like this. Okay, we'll have some smoke and fire coming off of it. All right. So anyways, there's my crashed airplane. It looks like a blob. And so if you were having well, maybe we'll make the smoke not so high. No, we lived it and it's not on fire. So here's my crashed airplane. And so if my emergency locating transmitter is coming, it can only transmit within this range here. So if you have a search and rescue plane coming by, they might not. What's a good search and rescue plane? Okay, this doesn't look too cool. All right. Well, that's a funny looking search and rescue plane. And so they won't pick up anything to find the emergency locating transmitter. And then by the time the plane gets here, they'll be like, "Oh, okay, now our little pointer thing to find him is going all over the place because it's directly underneath him." So the FM radio, it's if you crash somewhere flat, it's much better. Ideally, you don't crash at all. I still don't like saying crash because professional pilots don't crash. We have accidents. Okay, reportable accidents. Okay, and okay, what do we got here? Let's do this here. We got the FM radio. Okay, so yeah, like I was saying with that navigational beacon before, they eventually came out with what they call a VOR navigation beacon. So that stands for very VHF, very high frequency omnidirectional range, which is basically it's a different type of radio. And hey, Jordan, welcome to the show. And so that little guy is on your FM radio, and it goes from 108 to 136 and change, approximately. All right. So if you're listening in on a regular FM radio, you wouldn't hear the VOR beeping, and it does also a little Morse code, beep, 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 beep. And it sounds exactly like that. So here we go. And then for the ships, I didn't even know it, but Marine band. Okay, ships out on the sea. They're up at 156 to 174. megahertz. Okay, your ships are way up here. And so if you ever see where the ships are talking to the airplane up there, they probably won't be. So, anyways, yeah, what do we got here? VOR was that. Oh, and then yeah, so that's also the range here, 108 to 136. That's also the range that the you can transmit in an airplane, roughly. Okay, so that's kind of about that. And just for fun, you got your GPS, and now those are up in gigahertz. Okay, and yeah, there's apparently I just did a very little research on this, and 276. So there's a GPS is only transmitted on two frequencies: this exact frequency and that exact frequency. So it's like one. The way that the GPS determines where you are is that it'll be the satellite sends out a signal, and then or is it the satellite sends it out? Yeah, and then it receives it, and then the difference between the timing of how long it takes to go to you and back, it'll figure out the distance, and then they triangulate that, all this other fun stuff. So but that's a whole other thing if you want to start getting into GPSs. And when I am talking about these VORs and the NDBs, that's pretty old technology, really. It's not really used that much anymore. You'll have to know that for any of the written tests that you have to do. Maybe demonstrated a little bit for a flight test here and there, but yeah, basically, if you ever see any plane flying around, big jets, like they're almost. I was talking to a guy that used to be in charge of the Windsor control tower, and they were kind of transitioning a lot of the or decommissioning a lot of these more radio navigation aids. And oh, hey, Dustin, welcome here. so yeah, they were getting rid of some of these land-based navigation aids, and I was talking to the guy that was in charge of the control tower down here in Windsor, and I asked, like, does anyone even use those things anymore? And he's like, no. Basically, all the jets you see flying around, all the passenger jets and transports, anything you see, anybody flying around is flying with a GPS, unless it's like the little planes. You just look out the window and fly where you want to go, which is my favorite way of doing it. But yeah, and then he was saying that anytime they don't have a GPS on board, it's usually just unserviceable, so it's not working. And then I was like, whoa, hey, Mr. Controller, what happens then? Do they declare an emergency? He says, no, we just tell them vectors, okay, fly this heading. And then they get off a bit and they say, okay, fly this heading, and then they find the airport. So yeah, so it's basically everything out there is on a GPS. And anyway, there's a little bit for you there, Shecky, about what I can tell you about any of the radio stuff. And of course, when we are talking on the radio, we're using our phonetic alphabet, or Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrots, stuff like that. And that's about it. And lots of Roger Dodger, because saying Roger sounds really cool. And only pilots can get away with saying Roger on the radio without sounding like a weirdo. So anyways, cool. That's about it for today. See now, what are we going to do here? Today's Monday, so I'll be back on Wednesday. I'll be doing okay. Dan was requesting a little bit about this new kind of propeller design, so I'm gonna take out my aerodynamic hat and get into a little bit of a propeller design for Wednesday. And I will be back here on Wednesday, so because I do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon Eastern. And yeah, we'll just kind of shut her down here. And thank you guys for watching. Bye.